Sharon had told me that long ago. As usual, I didn't appreciate his wisdom until much later. According to the LA News, the explosion at Santa Monica Beach had been caused by a crazy kidnapper that fired a shotgun at a police car. He accidentally hit a gas main that ruptured during the earthquake. The crazy kidnapper, aka Aries, was the same man who had abducted me and two other adolescents in New York and brought us across the country on a 10-day odyssey of terror. Poor little Percy Jackson was an international criminal after all. He caused a commotion on that Greyhound bus in New Jersey trying to get away from his captor, and afterwards, witnesses would even swear they had seen the leather-clad man on the bus. Why didn't I remember him before? The crazy man had caused the explosion in the St. Louis Arch. After all, no kid could have done that. A concerned waitress in Denver had seen the man threatening the abductees outside her diner, gotten a friend to take a photo, and notified the police. Finally, brave Percy Jackson, I was beginning to like this kid, had stolen the gun from his captor in Los Angeles and battled him shotgun to rifle on the beach. Police had arrived just in time, but in the spectacular explosion, 5 police cars had been destroyed and the captor had fled. No fatalities had occurred. Percy Jackson and his 2 friends were safely in police custody. The reporters fed us this whole story. We just nodded and they acted tearful and exhausted, which wasn't hard, and played victimized kids for the cameras. All I want, I said, choking back, is to see my loving stepfather again. Every time I saw him on TV calling me a delinquent punk, I knew somehow we would be okay. And all he'll want is to reward each and every person in this beautiful city of Los Angeles with a free major appliance from his store. Here's the phone number. The police and reporters were so moved that they passed around the hat and raised money for 3 tickets on the next plane to New York. I knew that there's no choice but to fly. I hoped Zeus wouldn't cut me some slack considering the circumstances, but still hard to force myself on board the flight. Takeoff was a nightmare. Every spot of turbulence was scarier than a Greek monster. I didn't unclench my hands for armrests until we touched safely down at LaGuardia. The local press was waiting for us outside the security, but we managed to evade them thanks to Annabeth, who lured them away with her invisible Yankees cap, shouting, "They're over by the frozen yogurt, come on," then rejoined us at baggage claim. We split up at the taxi stand. I told Annabeth and Grover to get back to Half-Blood Hill and let Chiron know what happened. They protested. It was hard to let them go after all we'd been through, but I knew I had to do the last part of the quest by myself. If things went wrong and the gods didn't believe me, I wanted Annabeth and Grover to survive to tell Chiron the truth. I hopped into the taxi and headed to Manhattan. 30 minutes later, I walked into the lobby of the Empire State Building. I must have looked like the homeless kid with my tattered clothes and screwed-up face. I hadn't slept in at least 24 hours. I went up to the guard at the front desk and said 600th floor. He was reading a huge book with the picture of a wizard on the front. I wasn't much into fantasy, but the book must have been good, because the guard took a while to look up. "No such floor, kiddo. I need an audience with Zeus." He gave me a vacant smile. "Sorry." "You heard me." I was able to decide this guy was just a regular mortal, and I better run for it. He called up to the straight jacket patrol, and he said, "No appointment, no audience, kiddo. Lord Zeus doesn't see anyone unannounced." "Oh, I think he'll make an exception." I slipped off my backpack and unzipped the top. The guard looked inside the metal cylinder, not getting what it was for a few seconds, then his face went pale. "That isn't—" "Yes, it is, I promise. You want me to take it out and—" "No, no, no." He scrambled out of his seat, fumbled around the desk for a card key, then handed it to me. "Insert this in the security slot. Make sure nobody else is in the elevator with you." I did as he told me as the elevator doors closed. I slipped the key into the slot. The card disappeared and a new button appeared on the console, a red one that said 600. I pressed it and waited and waited. Music plays. Raindrops keep falling on my head. Finally, ding! The door slid open. I slipped out and almost had a heart attack. I was standing on the narrow stone away in the middle of the air. Below me was Manhattan, the height of the airplane in front of me. White marble step wound on the spine of a cloud into the sky. My eyes followed the stairway to its end where my brain just could not accept what I saw. "Look again," my brain said. "We're looking," my eyes insisted. "It's really there." From the top of the clouds rose the decapitated peak of the mountain, its summit covered with snow. Clinging to the mountainside were dozens of multi-level palaces, a city of mansions, all with white column porticos, gilded terraces, bronze braziers glowing with thousand fires. Roads wound crazily up to the peak where the largest palace gleamed against the snow. Precariously perched gardens bloomed with olive trees and rose bushes. I could make out the open-air market filled with colorful tints and a stone amphitheater built on the side of a mountain. A hippodrome and a coliseum on the other. It was ancient Greek city, except it wasn't in ruins. It was clean and new and colorful, the way Athens must have looked 2,500 years ago. This place can't be here, I told myself, the tip of a mountain hanging over New York City like a billion-ton asteroid. How could something be like that anchored above the Empire State Building in plain sight for millions of people and not get noticed? But it was here when I was here. My trip through Olympus was a daze. I passed some giggling wood nymphs who threw olives at me in their garden. Hawkers in a market offered to sell me ambrosia on a stick, a new shield, a genuine glitter weave replica of the Golden Fleece, as seen on Hephaestus TV. The 9 muses were tuning their instruments for a concert in the park, while a small crowd gathered, satyrs, naiads, and a bunch of good-looking teenagers who might have been minor gods and goddesses. Nobody seemed worried about an impending civil war. In fact, everybody seemed in a festive mood. Several of them turned to watch me pass and whimpered to themselves. I climbed down the main road towards the big palace at the peak. It was a reverse copy of the palace of the underworld. There everything had been black and bronze. Here everything was glittering white and silver. I realized Hades must have built his palace to resemble this one. He wasn't welcomed in Olympus except on winter solstice, so he built his own Olympus underground. Despite my bad experience with him, I felt a little sorry for the guy. To be banished from this place seemed really unfair. It would make anyone bitter. Steps led up to a central courtyard. Past that, the throne room. Room isn't really the word. The place made the grand central station look like a broom closet. Massive columns rose to the dome ceiling, which was gilded with moving constellations. 12 thrones built for beings the size of Hades were arranged in an inverted U, just like the cabins at Camp Half-Blood. An enormous fire crackled in the central hearth pit. The stones were empty except for 2 at the end. The head throne on the right was the one to its immediate left. I didn't have to be told who the gods were that were sitting there waiting for me to approach them. I came toward them, my legs trembling. The gods were in giant human form, as Hades had been, but I could barely look at them without feeling a tingle, as if my body were starting to burn. Zeus, the lord of the gods, wore a simple blue pinstripe suit. He sat on a simple throne of solid platinum. He had a well-trimmed beard, marble gray, and looked black like a storm cloud. His face was proud and handsome and grim, his eyes rainy gray. As I got nearer to him, the air crackled and smelled of ozone. The god sitting next to him was his brother, without a doubt, but he was dressed very differently. He reminded me of a beachcomber from Key West. He wore leather sandals, khaki Bermudas, and a Tommy Bahama shirt with coconuts and parrots all over it. His skin was deeply tanned, and his hands were scarred like old-time fishermen's. His hair was black like mine. His face had that same brooding look that had always gotten me and branded a rebel, but his eyes, seaweed green like mine, were surrounded by sun crinkles that told me he smiled a lot. His throne was a deep fisherman's chair. It was like the simple swiveling kind, with a black leather seat and a built-in holster for a fishing pole. Instead of pole, the holster held a bronze trident, flickering with green light around the tips. The gods weren't moving or speaking, but there was tension in the air. They'd just finished an argument. I approached the fisherman's throne and knelt at his feet. Father. I dared not look up. My heart was racing. If I could feel the energy emanating from the 2 gods, if I said something wrong, I had no doubt they could blast me into something. To my left, Zeus spoke. Should you not address the master of this house first, boy? I kept my head down and waited. Peace, brother, Poseidon finally said. His voice stirred my oldest memories, the warm glow I remembered as a baby. The sensation of this god's hand on my forehead. The boy defers to his father. This is only right. You still claim him then? Zeus said menacingly. You claim this child whom you sired, against our sacred oath. I have admitted my wrongdoing, Poseidon said. Now I would hear him speak. Wrongdoing? A lump welled in my throat. Was that all I was, or wrongdoing, the result of a god's mistake? I have spared him once already, Zeus grumbled, daring to fly through my domain. Pah! I should have blasted him out of the sky for his impotence. And risk destroying your own master bolt? Poseidon asked calmly. Let us hear him out, brother. Zeus grumbled some more. I shall listen, he decided. Then I shall make up my mind whether or not to cast this boy down from Olympus. Perseus, Poseidon said, look at me. I did, and I wasn't sure what I saw in his face. There's no clear sign of love or approval, nothing to encourage me. It was like looking at the ocean. Some days you could tell what mood it was in. Most days, though, it was unreadable, mysterious. I got the feeling Poseidon didn't really know what to think of me. He didn't know whether he was happy to have me as a son or not. In a strange way, I was glad that Poseidon was so distant. If he tried to apologize, or told me he loved me, or smiled, it would have felt fake. Like a human did. Bad. Like making lame excuses for not being around. I could live with that. After all, I wasn't sure about him yet. Either. Address Lord Zeus, boy, Poseidon tell him your story. So I told Zeus everything just as it had happened. I took out the metal cylinder, which began sparkling in the sky's god presence, and I laid it at his feet. There's a long silence, broken only by the cackle of the hearth fire. Zeus opened his palm. The lightning bolt flew into it. As he closed his fist, the metallic points flared with electricity. He was holding what looked like a classic thunderbolt, a 20-foot javelin of arcing, hissing energy that made the hairs on my scalp rise. I sense the boy tells the truth, Zeus muttered, but that Ares would do such a thing. It is most unlike him. He's proud and impulsive, Poseidon said. It runs in the family. Lord, I asked. They both said yes. Ares didn't act alone. Something else, came up with the idea. He described my dreams and the feelings I had on the beach, the momentary breath of evil that seemed to stop the world and made Ares back off from killing me. In the dreams, they said, the voice told me to bring the bolt to the underworld. Ares hinted that he'd been having dreams too. I think he was being used just as I to start the war. You're accusing Hades after all? Zeus said, no. I mean, Lord Zeus, I've been in the presence of Hades. This feeling on the beach was different. It was the same thing I felt when I got close to the pit, the entrance to Tartarus, wasn't it? Something powerful and evil stirring down there, something even older than the gods. Poseidon and Zeus looked at each other and had a quick, intense discussion in ancient Greek. I only caught one word, father. Poseidon made some kind of a suggestion, but Zeus cut him off. Poseidon tried to argue. Zeus held up his hand angrily. We'll speak of this no more, Zeus said. I must go personally to purify this thunderbolt in the waters of Lemnos, to remove the human taint from its metal. He rose and looked at me. His expression softened with affection of a degree. You've done me a service, boy. Few heroes could have accomplished as much. I had help, sir, Grover Underwood and Annabeth Chase. To show you my thanks, I shall spare your life. I do not trust you, Percy Jackson. I do not like what your arrival means for the future of Olympus. But for the sake of peace in the family, I shall let you live. Thank you, sir. Do not presume to fly again. Do not let me find you here when I shall return. Otherwise you shall taste this bolt, and it shall be your last sensation. Thunder shook the palace with a blinding flash of lightning. Zeus was gone. I was alone in the throne room with my father. Your uncle, Poseidon said, has always had a flair for dramatic exits. I think he would have done well as a god of theater. An uncomfortable silence. Sir, I said, what is in that pit? Poseidon regarded me. Have you not guessed? Kronos, I said, the king of the Titans. Even in the throne room of Olympus, far away from Tartarus, the name Kronos darkened the room, made the hearth fire seem not so warm on my back. Poseidon gripped his trident. And the first word, Percy. Zeus cut our father Kronos into 1,000 pieces, just as Kronos had done to his own father Ouranos. Zeus cast Kronos' remains in the darkest pit of Tartarus. The Titan army was scattered, their mountain fortress on Etna destroyed, their monstrous allies driven to the furthest corners of the earth. And yet the Titans cannot die, any more than we gods can. Whatever is left of Kronos is still alive in some hideous way, still conscious of his eternal pain, still hungering for power. He's healing, I said. He's coming back. Poseidon shook his head. From time to time, over eons, Kronos has stirred. He enters men's nightmare and breathes evil thoughts. He wakens restless monsters from the depths, but not to suggest that he could rise from the pit is another thing. That's what he intends, Father. That's what he said. Poseidon was silent for a long time. Lord Zeus has closed the discussion on this matter. He will not allow you to talk of Cronus. You've completed your quest, child. That is all you need to do. But I stopped myself. Arguing would do no good. It was very possibly the anger of the only God who on my side. As you wish, Father. A faint smile played on his lips. Obedience does not come naturally to you, does it? No, sir. I must take the blame for that, I suppose. The sea does not like to be restrained. He rose to his full height and took up his trident. Then he shimmered and became the size of a regular man, standing directly in front of me. You must go, child, but first, know that your mother has returned. I stared at him, completely stunned. My mother? You will find her at home. Hades sent her with you when he recovered his helm. Even the Lord of Death pays his debts. My heart was pounding. I couldn't believe it. Would you? I asked Poseidon if he would come with me to see her, but I realized that was ridiculous. I imagined loading the god of the sea into a taxi, taking him to the Upper East Side. If he wanted to see my mom all those years, he would have. And then there was smelly Gabe to think about. Poseidon's eyes took a little sadness. When you return home, Percy, you must make an important choice. You will find a package waiting in your room. A package? You understand that when you come to see it. No one can choose your path, Percy. You must decide. I nodded, though I didn't know what he meant. Your mother is a queen among women, Poseidon said wistfully. I had not met such immortal women in 1,000 years. Still, I am sorry that you were born, child. I have brought you into a hero's fate, and a hero's fate is never happy. It is never anything but tragic. I turned not to feel hurt. Here was my own dad telling me he was sorry I had been born. I don't mind, Father. Not yet, perhaps, he said. Not yet. But an unforgivable mistake on my part. I'll leave you then, I bowed awkwardly. I won't bother you again. I was 5 steps away when he called, Perseus. I turned. There's a different light in his eyes, a fiery kind of pride. You did well, Perseus. Do not misunderstand me. Whatever else you do, know that you are mine. You are a true son of the sea god. As we walked back to the city of gods, conversation stopped. The muses paused their concert. People in satires and knives all turned toward me, their faces filled with respect and gratitude. As I passed, they knelt as if I were some kind of a hero. 15 minutes later, still in a trance, I was back on the streets of Manhattan. I caught a taxi to my mom's apartment, rang the doorbell, and there was my beautiful mother, smelling of peppermint and licorice, the weariness and worry evaporating from her face as she saw me. Percy, oh thank goodness, oh my baby. She crushed the air right out of me. We stood in the hallway and cried as her hands ran through my hair. I'll admit my eyes were a little misty too. I was shaking. I was so relieved to see her. She told me she'd just appeared at the apartment that morning, scaring Gabe half out of his wits. She didn't remember anything since the Minotaur and couldn't believe it when Gabe told her I was a wanted criminal traveling across the country, blowing up national monuments. She'd been going out of her mind with worry all day because she hadn't heard the news. Gabe had forced her to go to work, saying she'd had a month's salary to make up and she'd better get started. I swallowed back my anger and told her my own story. I tried to make it sound less scary than it had been, but that wasn't easy. I was getting to fight with Ares, then Gabe's voice interrupted the living room. Hey, Sally. That meatloaf done or what? She closed her eyes. He isn't going to be happy to see you, Percy. The store got 500,000 phone calls today from Los Angeles. Something about free appliances. Oh yeah, about that. She managed a weak smile. Don't make him angrier, all right? Come on. In a month I'd been gone, the apartment had turned into Gabeland. Garbage was ankle-deep on the carpet. The sofa had been reupholstered in beer cans. Dirty socks and underwear hung off the lampshades. Gabe and his 3 big goony friends were playing poker at a table. When Gabe saw me, his cigar dropped out of his mouth. His face got redder than lava. You got some nerve coming here, you little punk. I thought the police... He's not a fugitive after all, my mom interjected. Isn't that wonderful, Gabe? Gabe looked back and forth between us. He didn't seem to think my homecoming was so wonderful. Bad enough I had to give you back your life insurance money, Sally, he growled. Get me on the phone. I'll call the cops. Gabe, no. He raised his eyebrows. Did you say no? You think I'm going to put up with that punk again? You can still press charges against him for ruining my Camaro, but... He raised his hand, my mother flinching. For the first time I realized something. Gabe had hit my mother. I didn't know when or how, but I was sure he'd done it. it had been going on for years when I wasn't around. A balloon of anger started expanding in my chest. I came towards Gabe, instinctively taking out my pen and my sword. He laughed. "What, punk? You gonna write on me?" He touched me. "You touched me and you're going to jail forever, you understand?" "Hey, Gabe," his friend interrupted. "He's just a kid." Gabe looked at him resentfully and mimicked in a falsetto voice. "Just a kid." His other voice laughed. His other friends laughed like idiots. "I'll be nice to you, punk." Gabe showed me his tobacco-stained teeth. "I'll give you 5 minutes to get your stuff out. Clear out. After that, I'll call the police." "Gabe," my mother pleaded. "He ran away," Gabe told her. "Let him stay." I was itching to uncap Riptide, but even if I did, the blade wouldn't hurt humans, and Gabe, by the loosest definition, was human. My mother took my arm. "Please, Percy, come on, go to your room." I let her pull me away, my hands still trembling with rage. My room had been completely filled with Gabe's junk. There were stacks of used car batteries, rotting bouquet of sympathy flowers with a card from somebody who'd seen his Barbara Walters interview. "Gabe is just upset, honey," my mother told me. "I'll talk to him later. I'm sure it will work out." "Mom, it'll never work out. Not as long as Gabe's here." She wrung her hands nervously. "I can. I'll take you to work with me for the rest of the summer. In the fall, maybe there's another boarding school." "Mom?" She lowered her eyes. "I'm trying, Percy. I need some time." A package appeared on my bed. At least I could have sworn it hadn't been there a moment before. It was battered cardboard, along with the right size to fit a basketball. The address on the mailing slip was in my own handwriting. "The Gods, Mount Olympus, 600th floor, Empire State Building, New York. Best wishes, Percy Jackson." Over the top of the black marker, in a man's clear bold print was an address of apartment and the words "Return to sender." Suddenly I had understood what Poseidon had told me on Olympus: a package, a decision. "Whatever else you do, you know that you are mine. You're a true son of the sea god." I looked at my mother. "Mom, do you want Gabe gone?" "Percy, it isn't that simple. Mom, just tell me, that jerk has been hitting you. Do you want him gone or not?" She hesitated, then nodded imperceptibly. "Yes, Percy, I do. And I'm trying to get my courage up to tell him, but you can't do this for me. You can't solve my problems." I looked at the box. I could solve her problem. I wanted to slice that package open, plop it on the poker table, and take out what was inside. I could start my very own statue garden right there in the living room. That's what a Greek hero would do in the stories, I had thought, but that's what Gabe deserves. But a hero's story always ends in tragedy. Poseidon had told me that. I remembered the underworld, and I thought about Gabe's spirit drifting over the fields of asphodel, or condemned to some hideous torture behind barbed wires in a field of punishment. An internal poker game, sitting up to his waist in boiling oil, listening to opera music. Did I have the right to send someone there, even Gabe? A few months ago, I wouldn't have hesitated. Now, I can't do it, I told my mom. "One look inside this box and he'll never bother you again." She glanced at the package and seemed to understand immediately. "No, Percy," she said, stepping away. "You can't." "Poseidon called you a queen," I told her. "He said he hadn't met a woman like you in 1,000 years." Her cheeks flushed. "Percy, you deserve better than this, Mom. You should go into college, get your degree. You could write your novel, meet a nice guy, live in a nice house. You don't need to protect me anymore by staying with Gabe. Let me get rid of him." She wiped a tear off her cheek. "You sound so much like your father," she said. "He offered to stop the tide for me. He offered to build me a palace at the bottom of the sea. He thought he could solve all my problems with a wave of his hands." "What's wrong with that?" Her multicolored eyes seemed to search inside me. "I think you know, Percy. I think you're enough like me to understand. If my life is going to mean anything, I have to live it myself. I can't let a god take care of me or my son. I have to find the courage on my own. Your quest has reminded me of that." We listened to the sound of poker chips and swearing. ESPN from the living room television. "I'll leave the box," I said. "If he threatens you." She looked pale, but she nodded. "Where will you go, Percy?" "Half-Blood Hill. For the summer or forever?" "I guess that depends." We locked eyes, and I sensed that we had an agreement. We would see how things stood at the end of the summer. She kissed my forehead. "You'll be a hero, Percy. You'll be the greatest of all." I took one last look at my bedroom. I had a feeling that I'd never see it again. Then I walked with my mother to the front door. "Leaving so soon, punk?" Gabe called after me. "Good riddance." I had one twinge of doubt. How could I turn the perfect chance of taking revenge on him? I was leaving here without saving my mother. "Hey, Sally," he yelled. "What about that meatloaf, huh?" steely look of anger flared in my mother's eyes, and I thought just maybe I was leaving her in good hands after all. Her own. That meatloaf is coming right up, dear, she told Gabe. Meatloaf's surprise. She looked at me and winked. The last thing I saw was the door slung closed as my mother staring at Gabe as if she were contemplating how he would look as a garden statue.